No one standing inside the grand cathedral that afternoon understood why the bride looked as though her heart had already been broken. The cameras flashed. Guests whispered. A string quartet played a beautiful melody. And while everyone admired the breathtaking woman in white, Isabella Moretti stood frozen beside the altar, fighting tears that threatened to ruin her makeup. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Instead, it felt like the day she was burying every dream she had ever held close. Because the man waiting for her wasn't the prince she had imagined as a little girl. He was feared, powerful, dangerous, the man known throughout the city as Dante Romano, the head of the Romano family, a name people spoke carefully, a name enemies feared, and somehow, he had become her husband. But what no one knew, not the guests, not the reporters gathered outside, not even the priests standing between them, was that Isabella wasn't marrying him for love. She was sacrificing herself, and the truth behind that sacrifice would change both their lives forever. Because sometimes, the most beautiful love stories begin with broken hearts. And sometimes, the people who appear the most dangerous are hiding wounds no one ever sees. But before Isabella Moretti became the wife of the city's most feared man, before fate placed her in the center of a world she never wanted, she had been nothing more than a girl trying desperately to save the people she loved. And her story began long before that wedding day. It began with a dream, and with a promise she would eventually pay for with her own future. But at the time, she had no idea. Long before expensive gowns and diamond rings entered her life, Isabella lived in a tiny apartment above her father's old bakery. At 24 years old, she had a smile capable of brightening the darkest room and a heart too kind for her own good. Everyone who knew her said the same thing. Isabella cared too much. She worried too much. And she loved too deeply. Perhaps that was because life had taught her early how precious family truly was. Her mother had died when Isabella was 16. Cancer had taken away the woman who had filled their home with laughter. Since then, Isabella had become the glue holding everyone together. Her father, Marco Moretti, had never recovered from losing his wife. And her younger brother, Luca, had spent his teenage years trying to hide his pain behind jokes and careless smiles. So Isabella stepped into the role no young girl should ever have to carry. She became the comfort, the strength, the hope. By day, she worked as a children's art teacher. By evening, she helped her father at the bakery. And every night before sleeping, she secretly painted. Painting had always been her greatest dream. Not fame, not fortune, just beauty. Simple beauty. She dreamed of opening a small gallery one day, a place where people could feel happiness through colors. But dreams required money, and money was something the Moretti family never seemed to have enough of. Still, they were together, and for Isabella, that had always been enough. Until one terrible night changed everything. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. The bakery had just closed. The scent of fresh bread still filled the air when two men entered. They weren't customers. Their expensive suits and cold eyes made that clear immediately. Marco Moretti's face turned pale, and Isabella noticed something she had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Please, her father whispered. Give me more time. Time. More time for what? Confusion spread across Isabella's face. The older man shook his head. You've had enough time. We want our money. Her money? No. Her father's money. Thousands. No. Hundreds of thousands. Years earlier, after his wife's illness and the bakery's financial collapse, Marco Moretti had borrowed from dangerous people. People who never forgot debts. People who didn't believe in second chances. And now, they had come to collect. That night, Isabella discovered the truth her father had hidden for years. Their family wasn't struggling. They were drowning. And the sharks had arrived. What happened next would force her into a decision no woman should ever have to make. Because sometimes love asks for sacrifices. But Isabella was about to discover that sacrifice came with a price. 3 weeks later, Luca disappeared. Panic consumed Isabella. Hours turned into nightmares. Her father broke down completely. And then the phone call came. Not from kidnappers. Not from the police. But from a man named Vincenzo Romano. Dante Romano's uncle. The old man's voice was calm, almost polite, which somehow made it even more terrifying. Your brother is safe. Isabella nearly collapsed. Please, she cried. Where is he? With people who owe loyalty to the Romano family. Fear flooded her body. What do you want? Silence. Then, a meeting. Nothing more. Just one meeting. The following evening, Isabella entered Romano Manor. The mansion looked less like a home and more like a kingdom. Luxury surrounded her. But beneath the beauty, danger lingered. Men in black suits stood everywhere. And each step deeper into the estate made her heart pound harder. Eventually, she entered a room unlike anything she had imagined. And sitting beside the fireplace, reading a book, was the man whose name made powerful people nervous. Dante Romano. He wasn't what she expected. No gold chains. No cruel laughter. No arrogance. Instead, the man before her seemed strangely quiet, composed, almost lonely. Dark eyes lifted from the pages. And for the first time, Isabella saw him. Not the legend. Not the rumors. A man, 35 years old, handsome in a dangerous sort of way, but exhausted, as though carrying burdens invisible to everyone else. He stood immediately. Miss Moretti. His voice was calm, respectful, nothing like the monster she had imagined. And that frightened her even more, because monsters were easy to hate. But this man, he confused her. And then he spoke the words that would alter the course of her entire life. Marry me. The world stopped. Her breathing stopped. Even time itself seemed to freeze. What? Dante looked directly into her eyes. Your family's debt disappears. Your brother remains safe. Your father keeps the bakery. And in return, his expression became unreadable. You become my wife. Isabella stared in horror. This couldn't be real. People didn't make deals like this. Not outside movies. Not in real life. Yet the man standing before her was deadly serious. She expected cruelty, threats. But instead, he said something unexpected. You have the right to refuse. Her eyes widened. Refuse? You would let me walk away? Dante's gaze darkened. No, others wouldn't. But I would. That answer should have comforted her. Instead, it raised a terrifying question. If Dante Romano wasn't the monster everyone believed, then who was? And why? Why would a man like him want a wife who had absolutely nothing to offer? The answer would shatter everything Isabella thought she understood. And eventually, it would lead her straight into a love neither of them had ever expected. But first, she had to survive becoming Mrs. Dante Romano. For 3 sleepless nights, Isabella Moretti wrestled with a choice no one should ever have to make. Every answer led to pain. Every possibility ended with sacrifice. She could refuse, but refusing would place her father and brother in danger. She could run, but people like the Romanos always found what they were looking for. And she could accept. Accept a life she never wanted. Accept a marriage without love. Accept becoming the wife of a man whose name frightened the entire city. In the end, Isabella made the choice she believed would save everyone she loved. And so, 1 month later, she stood beside Dante Romano in front of hundreds of guests. The world saw luxury, but inside her heart, a storm raged. She smiled for photographs. She thanked guests. She listened to congratulations. Yet every word felt distant, because deep down, she believed she had just surrendered her future. What she didn't know was that the man standing beside her had already sacrificed something precious. Himself. Something no one knew, not even his closest allies. And that secret had everything to do with her. After the wedding, Isabella expected to enter a cold marriage. She expected commands, control, cruelty. But nothing happened. On the first night, Dante personally walked her to her room. Not their room. Her room. The mansion was enormous. And the bedroom prepared for her looked like something from a dream. Soft lights, fresh flowers, a balcony overlooking the sea, paintings hanging on the walls. And beside the bed, a collection of art supplies, brushes, canvas, paints, professional quality. Isabella stood frozen. Nobody knew how much painting meant to her. Nobody except. Her eyes slowly lifted. Dante stood quietly by the doorway. I thought you might miss it. She blinked. You knew? He nodded. Children at St. Gabriel Academy still talk about Miss Moretti and her paintings. Surprise spread across her face. You researched me? A small smile touched his lips. I wanted to know the woman I was asking to sacrifice everything. Before she could answer, he spoke again. This room is yours. You can lock the door. No one enters without your permission. And if one day you hate me enough to leave. His voice softened. No chains will stop you. With that, he walked away, leaving Isabella speechless. Because nothing about this marriage made sense. and nothing about Dante Romano matched the stories, which only raised a frightening question. What kind of man gave freedom to someone who had every reason to hate him? And why did sadness seem to follow him everywhere? The answers remained hidden, but little by little, Isabella's fear began to turn into curiosity, and curiosity can be dangerous. Days became weeks. Weeks slowly became months, and Isabella started noticing things. Strange things. Dante never raised his voice, never forced her to attend events, never demanded affection. In fact, he often kept his distance, almost as though he feared making her uncomfortable. Every morning, breakfast appeared exactly the way she liked. Tea with honey, fresh fruit, warm croissants. Someone had memorized her preferences, but it wasn't the servants. It was him. She discovered that accidentally. One morning when she entered the kitchen before sunrise, and there he was, the feared Dante Romano, standing alone, making coffee. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he cleared his throat awkwardly. "You wake up early." "So do you," Isabella replied. A strange silence followed, and then she noticed something unbelievable. He looked nervous, not dangerous, not intimidating, nervous, as though he had been caught. That image remained in her mind for the rest of the day. The man everyone feared, blushing because his wife had caught him preparing breakfast. It made no sense, and yet, it made her smile. There were other surprises. One afternoon, Isabella visited a children's hospital to deliver supplies. She had volunteered there for years, and while speaking to the nurses, she noticed a new wing under construction. "Who donated for that?" she asked. The nurse smiled warmly. "Mr. Romano." Isabella blinked. "Dante Romano." The woman laughed. "There are many Romanos, dear. No, the donor prefers to remain anonymous. But everyone here knows." Confusion spread inside her. Anonymous? The newspapers called Dante ruthless, heartless, dangerous. Yet hospitals, orphanages, scholarships, food programs, everywhere she looked, his name appeared, always hidden, always secret, always helping. Why? That question haunted her, until one evening she finally asked. "Dante." He looked up from his book. "Yes." "Why do you hide it?" His eyes grew distant. "The world needs villains. And sometimes," he paused, "it's easier when they believe you're one." That answer only deepened the mystery, because behind those dark eyes, pain lived, ancient pain, and Isabella was beginning to realize something extraordinary. Perhaps Dante Romano wasn't hiding evil. Perhaps he was hiding heartbreak. But heartbreak from what? Or whom? The answer came unexpectedly, and it changed everything. Winter arrived, and with it came countless charity galas and business events. Though married, Isabella and Dante still felt like strangers learning how to breathe around one another. But something had changed. Their conversations grew longer, their laughter more frequent, and slowly, without realizing it, Isabella stopped feeling trapped. She started feeling safe. One evening, while searching for a book in the library, she accidentally opened a hallway she had never noticed before. At the very end stood a single locked door. Unlike the rest of the mansion, this area felt untouched, silent, forgotten. She stared curiously, and suddenly, "Dinner is ready." His voice startled her. Turning around, she saw Dante standing behind her. But something was wrong. Fear. Actual fear. It flashed across his face. For the first time since meeting him, his calm expression disappeared. "That room stays closed," he said quietly. Not angry, not harsh, just sad. Isabella immediately stepped away. "I'm sorry." His expression softened. "No." His voice became gentle. "You've done nothing wrong." But that night, she noticed something strange. Dante didn't come downstairs for dinner. And long after midnight, while unable to sleep, she saw him sitting alone outside, staring at the stars, holding a photograph. His shoulders trembled, and for the first time, Isabella realized something shocking. Dante Romano cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, silently, like a man carrying grief too heavy to share. Her heart tightened, because whatever pain lived inside that locked room, it had never truly left him. And somehow, without understanding why, she wanted to help. But opening old wounds can reveal terrible truths. And soon, Isabella would discover the tragedy that created the man everyone feared. A tragedy that had left scars no amount of power could erase. And when she finally learned the truth, nothing between them would ever be the same. The answer arrived during a charity banquet. The evening sparkled with wealth and elegance. Champagne glasses reflected crystal chandeliers. Music filled the ballroom, and everyone admired the mysterious Mrs. Romano. Yet Isabella noticed something strange. Whenever a little girl approached their table to thank Dante for supporting the children's foundation, his entire expression changed. Tenderness, warmth, and heartbreak, as if looking at something precious that no longer existed. Then an elderly woman approached. The moment she saw Dante, tears filled her eyes. Without hesitation, the old woman embraced him. "My son." Isabella froze. "Son?" Dante gently kissed the woman's forehead. "How have you been, Mama Sofia?" The woman smiled. "Better now." Then her eyes turned toward Isabella. "She looks like sunlight." And before anyone could react, tears began running down the woman's cheeks. So much like her. Dante stiffened. Pain crossed his face. And Mama Sofia immediately apologized. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." But Isabella's curiosity had already awakened. Like her? Like who? The answer arrived later that night. Through Vincenzo Romano. Dante's uncle sighed heavily. 20 years ago, Dante wasn't this man. He laughed. He dreamed. He loved. He was engaged. Isabella's heartbeat slowed. Engaged? Her name was Elena. She died. Silence filled the room. An explosion. Wrong place. Wrong time. And their daughter. Vincenzo's voice broke. Never survived either. Everything around Isabella seemed to stop. Daughter? Dante had once been a father. And he had lost everything. His fiancée. His child. His happiness. His future. The locked room. The tears. The loneliness. Suddenly, it all made sense. And in that moment, something unexpected happened. Fear disappeared, replaced by compassion. Because for the first time, she no longer saw Dante Romano. She saw a man whose heart had been shattered, and perhaps never healed. But destiny had a strange sense of timing. Because just as Isabella began understanding him, someone else entered their lives. Someone who wanted revenge. Someone who had been waiting years. And that person intended to destroy everything Dante loved, including the woman who had slowly become the light inside his darkness. Without realizing it, Isabella was about to become the target of a war she never saw coming. Winter slowly gave way to spring, and somewhere between quiet breakfasts, shared evenings, and countless conversations that stretched long past midnight, something inside Isabella Moretti began to change. It happened so gradually that she didn't notice it at first. She no longer jumped whenever Dante entered a room. She no longer counted the days since the wedding. And she no longer imagined escaping the mansion, because somewhere along the way, the mansion had stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like home, which frightened her more than anything, because home meant attachment, and attachment meant vulnerability, something she had promised herself she would never allow. Yet her heart seemed to have other plans. One evening, Isabella stood in her art studio, completely lost in a painting. Colors danced across the canvas. Music played softly. For the first time in years, peace surrounded her. Without realizing it, she had been smiling, until she noticed someone watching from the doorway. Dante. He stood perfectly still, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "You should knock," she teased. A small smile appeared. "You were happy." The answer confused her. "So?" He lowered his eyes. "I didn't want to interrupt." And somehow, those simple words touched her heart, because powerful men usually demanded attention. But Dante? He protected happiness, even when it wasn't his own. She looked at him carefully. "When was the last time you painted?" His eyebrow rose. "Painted? You know how." He chuckled softly. "Terribly." "Then try." His eyes widened slightly. "No." "Why not?" "Because I know I'll ruin it." Isabella laughed. "No one ruins art." And before he could protest, she placed a brush in his hand. The feared Dante Romano looked absolutely horrified, which made her laugh even harder. And for the first time in many years, Dante laughed too. Not politely, not quietly, but genuinely. A deep, warm laugh. The kind that belonged to a younger man, a happier man. And in that moment, neither realized that someone had secretly taken a photograph through the window. Someone watching from afar. Someone who had waited years for a weakness. And Isabella Moretti had just become one. The first warning came anonymously. No name, no return address, just a single photograph. The picture showed Isabella and Dante laughing together in the studio. Across the image, someone had written 3 chilling words. "He always loses." Isabella's blood ran cold. Dante's face darkened immediately, and for the first time since their marriage, genuine fear appeared in his eyes. Not for himself, for her. That terrified her, because men like Dante Romano didn't fear easily. Yet now, he looked haunted. "Who sent this?" she whispered. But he already knew. His expression turned grim. Someone from the past. Someone who should have stayed buried. Before she could ask another question, he issued orders throughout the mansion. Security doubled. Bodyguards appeared everywhere. And suddenly, the peaceful life Isabella had grown accustomed to vanished overnight. But what frightened her most was Dante himself. Not because he became cruel, but because he became distant. Again, the walls she had spent months breaking down suddenly returned. He avoided conversations, skipped meals, worked through the night, and every time Isabella approached him, she saw something painful. Guilt. Terrible guilt. Finally, she confronted him. Standing inside his office, she crossed her arms. "Talk to me." Silence. Dante. Still silence. Then finally, "You should leave." The word struck her like ice. "What?" His eyes refused to meet hers. "This marriage has lasted long enough. I'll make sure your family is protected. You'll have money, freedom, anything you want. But you need to leave." Her chest tightened. "Why?" His voice broke. "Because everyone close to me dies." The room became silent. And then she understood. This wasn't rejection. It was fear. Fear born from 20 years of grief. Fear that history would repeat itself. Fear that loving someone meant losing them. And suddenly, something inside Isabella shattered. Not because he wanted her gone, but because she realized something she had tried desperately to deny. She loved him. Completely. Terrifyingly. Hopelessly. Somewhere between shared coffee and quiet laughter. Somewhere between sadness and healing. She had fallen in love with her husband. And now, the man she loved was trying to push her away. But Isabella Moretti had spent her entire life fighting for the people she loved. And she wasn't about to stop now. Because this time, she intended to save him too. But before she could reach his heart completely, their enemy struck. And the nightmare that followed would change everything. It happened so quickly. One moment, Isabella was leaving the children's hospital after delivering art supplies. The next, darkness. A hand, a needle, and silence. When she opened her eyes, she was somewhere unfamiliar. Cold walls, dim lights, a chair, and an older man sitting across from her. Silver hair, cruel eyes, and a smile that sent chills down her spine. "Good evening, Mrs. Romano." Fear flooded her body. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "A ghost. But your husband remembers." He leaned forward. "My name is Alessandro Marino." The name meant nothing to Isabella. But to Dante Romano, it meant war. Because 20 years earlier, Alessandro Marino had blamed Dante's family for the explosion that killed his own son. Hatred had consumed him, and over time, revenge became his religion. For 2 decades, he had waited patiently, and now, he intended to destroy Dante the same way life had destroyed him, by taking away the woman he loved. The same way Elena had been taken away. Back at Romano Manor, panic erupted. Every man in the organization searched. Police connections activated. Private investigators mobilized. But Dante himself sat perfectly still. Too still. His uncle recognized that silence. And it terrified him. Because this wasn't anger. This wasn't rage. It was grief. The same grief he had seen 20 years earlier. "Dante." No answer. "Say something." And then, the silence broke. "Dying never scared me." His voice trembled. But losing her. He closed his eyes. "I can't survive that twice." For the first time in decades, the feared Dante Romano broke down. Not as a mafia boss. Not as a powerful man. But as someone desperately in love. And everyone present understood something shocking. The great Dante Romano, the man newspapers called heartless, loved his wife with every piece of his shattered soul. And if anything happened to her, there would be nothing left. But hundreds of miles away, inside that dark room, Isabella Moretti faced Alessandro Marino alone. And what she learned next would reveal a secret even Dante himself never knew. A truth hidden for 20 years. A truth connected to Elena. And one that would completely rewrite the past. Alessandro Marino expected fear. Expected tears. Expected pleading. But Isabella surprised him. Because after months beside Dante, she had learned something important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing not to surrender to it. And so, despite the terror inside her heart, she remained calm. Why me? She asked. Alessandro sighed. Because he loves you. He loved another woman once. And because of him, she died. Something inside Isabella stirred. No. The old man smiled sadly. That's what he believes. He carries the guilt. But guilt and truth are rarely the same. Then Alessandro reached into a drawer and removed an envelope. Old, yellowed, worn by time. This letter was never delivered. Confusion crossed Isabella's face. Whose letter? The answer nearly stopped her heart. Elena Romano. No, Elena never became a Romano. She had died before the wedding. Yet the old man still called her that, as if in his mind. She had always belonged to Dante. Alessandro's expression softened. My son caused the explosion. He made enemies. Elena and the child were never targets. They were victims. And before she died, his voice trembled. She wrote this. Tears filled his eyes. She begged Dante not to blame himself. For 20 years, the letter remained hidden. For 20 years, Dante had lived believing he had destroyed his own family. And for 20 years, the truth had been buried beneath grief. Isabella stared at the envelope, her hands shaking, because inside those pages lay the power to heal a wound that had nearly destroyed the man she loved. But before she could speak, gunfire echoed outside, and suddenly, chaos exploded around them. Because Dante Romano had found her, and he was coming, not as a king, not as a boss, not as a legend, but as a husband trying to bring his wife home. And before the night ended, everything would change. The sound of gunfire echoed through the abandoned estate like thunder. Windows shattered. Voices shouted. Footsteps raced through dark hallways. And in the middle of the chaos, Isabella's heart pounded violently. Not because she feared death, but because she knew exactly who had come for her. Dante. And somehow, that terrified her even more. Because she had seen the grief in his eyes. She had seen the guilt he carried. And she knew that if anything happened to her tonight, the darkness that had haunted him for 20 years would swallow him forever. Alessandro Marino slowly stood from his chair. His tired eyes closed for a moment. Then he sighed. It seems he never stopped being stubborn. More gunshots. Closer now. And strangely, the old man didn't appear angry, only exhausted, as though revenge itself had become too heavy to carry. He came alone? Isabella whispered. Alessandro gave a bitter laugh. No. He came with hell itself. 3 floors below, chaos surrounded Dante Romano. His men fought desperately, but the feared head of the Romano family wasn't waiting, wasn't hiding, wasn't giving orders from safety. He moved through danger like a man possessed. Because the truth was simple. Nothing frightened Dante Romano more than history repeating itself. 20 years earlier, he had arrived too late. He had held Elena's lifeless body in his arms. And ever since that day, nightmares had followed him. But not tonight. Not again. Never again. Even if death waited behind the next door. Even if every enemy in the world stood before him, he would reach her, or die trying. Because somewhere along the way, without realizing it, Isabella Moretti had become his reason to live. When the office door finally burst open, Isabella jumped to her feet. And there he stood, disheveled, breathing heavily, blood on his sleeve, his eyes wild with fear. Not anger, not rage. Fear. Pure fear. The moment he saw her unharmed, his entire body froze. And then, to Isabella's shock, his knees nearly gave out. Relief. Overwhelming relief. He crossed the room within seconds. And before she could speak, his arms wrapped around her. Tightly. Almost desperately. As though letting go would destroy him. Neither said a word. Because some emotions were too powerful for language. She felt his heartbeat. Fast. Uneven. And then, something warm touched her shoulder. Tears. Dante Romano was crying. Silently. Brokenly. Like a man who had just received a second chance from heaven itself. And hearing those quiet sobs, Isabella's own tears fell. Because in that embrace, she understood something extraordinary. This wasn't possession. This wasn't obsession. This wasn't control. It was love. Beautiful. Terrifying. Selfless love. The kind that asked for nothing. The kind willing to suffer in silence. And suddenly, she knew. She had been wrong from the beginning. She had married him to save her family. But somewhere between sacrifice and destiny, she had found her soulmate. Then Dante noticed Alessandro Marino. Instantly, his expression hardened. The room grew silent. 20 years of hatred stood face to face. But before anyone could speak, the old man held out the envelope. With trembling hands, Dante, his voice cracked. I'm tired. Confusion appeared in Dante's eyes. What game is this? No games. Alessandro's tears surprised everyone, especially himself. Just regrets. Slowly, he extended the letter. She wanted you to have this. The name written on the envelope stole the air from Dante's lungs.